Welcome to our Yurtiful Life podcast. In today's episode, we will be discussing our first simple solar setup.
Hey there, Yurties.
Thanks for joining us today. For anyone new here, I'm Keegan.
And I'm Sarah. We've been living a minimal off-grid lifestyle for over 10 years now.
We have a large family and lots of experiences to share.
So let's get to it. Welcome to
Our Yurtiful Life.
So today we're going to be discussing our first simple solar setup. And I'm going to try
Emphasis on the word simple.
to keep Keegan and keep this simple. But
for those who don't know, autistic individuals, we all have our hot buttons or the things we love to study. This is one of them for me. So we get really talkative on those topics.
So as a disclaimer, before we get into solar at all, we are sharing this information for information only. You need to know your own location requirements, laws, regulations, what works for you in your area legally and safely. And just because we did something, we do not recommend somebody else do it. We are sharing our story, our knowledge for informational purposes only.
Hopefully it'll benefit you.
All right. So when thinking solar, part of off-grid living, it tends to be people wanting to do solar and get into that. The first thing is knowing what your solar needs are. What do you actually need for solar? So Keegan, how did we figure out what we needed for solar capacity? And how would you recommend somebody going about figuring out their needs?
Well, the assumption is that you're already using electricity in your daily life, but none of it is solar based. So if that's where you're at and you want to transition yourself onto solar power, then really what you need to do is take stock or do the math. Take stock of what you have that you're using right now daily. And the best way to do that is your appliances. In America, all appliances are legally required to have stickers that show their energy consumption. So if you find those stickers on the back of your fridge, on the back of your microwave, whatever it is, any appliance, a toaster, they should have ratings and telling you how much they consume in watts. If they don't tell you directly in watts, they'll usually tell you voltage and amperage. You can figure out watts from there. But what you need to do is do the math, add up all your appliances you use each day, and that'll give you a rough average of how much electricity each day you consume.
Or you could just check your smart meter and utilities bill and get a rough idea of what you consume.
That also works, especially with smart meters these days. You could look at that and average out. The company might even have a chart that shows you your daily average energy consumption.
So something I learned when we were starting solar is that solar is not 100% efficient, because in my mind, if I use, say, 1,000 watts a day, I just need 1,000 watts in my battery bank. But Keegan taught me this is not the case.
No, you always should build your system bigger than you think you're going to need. Rough rule of thumb is a 20% buffer. So you want to build your system to create 20% more and store 20% more than you really think you're going to need in a day.
And so for me, when we were beginning to go off grid, I looked at our energy consumption, where Keegan calculated it. And my first thought was, what can we cut back? What do we want to do without or do alternatively? Keegan taught me that the number one source of electrical consumption is
electrical heating. Any kind of electric heating coil, such as a hot water tank or a toaster. All of these things, electricity uses a lot of electricity to create heat.
So crock pots, Instapots, ovens, stoves, those use a lot of electricity. So for us personally, it was when we went off grid, how many of these things can we cut from our life? And we cut everything and really went
pretty much
rough off grid with.
We're not there now, but when we first started off years ago, that's how we did it. We approached it. I did off of one simple battery and one solar panel and a really simple on-off charge controller. So really all we could do was charge a computer, a laptop computer, and cell phones with that setup.
And light strips. We
ran some LED lights. They were originally designed to be LED work van lights, but they work good.
But our hot water, we did all on our wood stove, or we did have a small propane burner for that. Yep. We ditched the toaster, the crock pot, Instapot. We had a stovetop oven that we used. And
That was our main cooking
that was our
surface.
cooking
Granted, it
for
was just her and I, and
and a
then
baby.
a baby, so we were pretty small then.
So I think we had that basic setup for the first two children.
Yep.
And it worked. It's what we were needed at that time. But if you were talking to someone now, or even when we discuss it now, Keegan,
Mhm.
how would you talk through planning the system, the types of different systems, and all of that?
So major systems today are broken up either a 12 volt, a 24 volt, or a 48 volt system. I've always done 12 volt systems in the past. I'm looking at now putting us on a 24 volt system, which is much more popular these days. The biggest difference being the thickness of the wires that you need to run to gauge the wiring, and it can make it much more cost effective. The higher you make their voltage, that 24 volt is a sweet spot, a balance between how much it's going to cost you to wire up your system and how efficient it can be. So of course, what can you afford? There's going to be a big. Not only can you, there's going to be a big question that you need to answer. Not only can you cut costs by not having to have such a big system if you're not consuming as much, but also when you build your system, how much is it going to cost wiring? I would say, aside from a charge controller and the batteries, I would say the charge controller and the wiring is probably going to be some of your most expensive parts, depending on how you wire up your system, because that charge controller is the smart unit or the bridge that everything has to go across between the battery bank and your solar panels, assuming you're doing the labor yourself, the DIY install. Um,
So what you're saying is you can start small with room to expand if you are starting with a more limited budget.
Yes, so if you're trying to start small and you want to expand your battery bank or your system over time, I would say don't skimp. If you're gonna have to sink your money into one item, sink it as much as possible into your charge controller. Get a larger charge controller than you need. A large charge controller can always handle a smaller load, but a small charge controller cannot handle a bigger load than it's designed for. So I'd rather, if you're trying to start fresh, I'd rather you buy a larger charge controller up front than you really need, because then you can add batteries and panels without changing your charge controller down the road.
So you want to go as big as you can with the charge controller and then add to your smaller rest of your system as you can.
Right. And a charge controller will determine how efficient your system is. A better charge controller will make better use of the energy coming from your panels, and it'll protect your batteries better.
So I do want to add two caveats here. You do need to be responsible to do your own research as far as what your needs are, what equipment you're going to use, brands, types, etc. That's very important that you are informed yourself when you're planning your system. Now, if you are not completely confident or even at the place where you want to plan your own system, then you really should hire a professional to assist you or do it for you. There are people who specialize in solar and do this for a living. So if
Yep.
you're a DIYer and you really do, then you need to put in the time, effort to expand your own knowledge base so you can safely do it. And
Right.
if you're not at that place, please put the investment into hiring someone who can safely do it for you.
Or an in between spot is if you want to experiment with solar, but you're not ready to put your entire house onto solar. There are some smaller systems that are fully ready to go. You're going to pay more for the amount of things you get, but it'll come as a nice, tidy, ready to go set: panels, charge controller, inverter, all of that all together.
So, our very first solar setup, Keegan mentioned, was a
Very
modified 5 in
Frankenstein.
1
Yeah. So we got a little 5-in-1 inverter, like little air compressor and battery charger with a little
jumper
AC port,
cables.
jumper cable, like one of those little boxes you can throw in your car and it's like emergency pack. I turned that into our first solar bank. I opened up the back and realized there's a small AGM battery inside of there, so therefore I could charge it with a charge controller. So I opened up the back and I modified the wiring so that I could run one panel and one little small LED charge controller to that battery and recharge that battery from there. I did that because then I had no need to, it was very mobile and I had no need to install outlets or anything like that. They're right there on the face of the 5-in-1 unit. We could just plug our computer directly into there. It had a USB port for our cell phones. That's why I went that direction.
So, it worked very well for us. We had that one port, the one plug in. It worked great for quite a while, quite a few years. We used that as our system. But as time went on, we improved our system. We ended up adding more panels till our eventual setup. The last time we were completely off grid was 4 panels.
Yeah, 4 100-watt panels.
And a charge controller and inverter. And this allowed us to add more lights. We definitely had fuses in the system.
Right. I upgraded to an MPPT charge controller, which just means it has a computer brain in it. They're really popular now, and that is able to use an algorithm to make the most energy depending on the time of day. Usually sunrise, sunset is when you lose performance, and with an MPPT charge controller, it's able to modify the way the energy goes in the batteries and get as much as possible during those times of day.
Now, the electricity that we used at that point, we had several lights in the yurt. We had a water pump for helping pump water from a nearby creek to the yurt. We had a washing machine, not your
Not a full
typical full
size.
size, but
Yep.
a small apartment size washing
There's an
machine
agitator one end and spinner in the other.
that definitely cut the time of off grid laundry drastically. So the washer definitely helped make off grid laundry easier. And we also, at this point, were running several fans for short periods of time, as well as the computer. 2 fans, right?
Yep. 2
And
medium-sized
at
fans.
this point in time, we didn't have the 5-in-1. This was a different system.
Right. We had at that point upgraded to AGM batteries. I'd made an AGM battery bank, 100 amp hours per battery, and I think we originally had two and added a third battery at one point. This was on a 12-volt system.
So it's an ongoing process and progress. And after about 6 years of living off grid, we went back on grid for, what was it, about a year and a half, 2 years.
Yep.
And then we have, since that time, for the last 2 years, been working towards going off grid again. And I say working towards because our house does still currently run electric power, but we are working. We do have generators set up so the house can run completely off a generator. And we're working on getting the current solar system back up running and at a better place where we can use it 100%.
Right. I am building back better. I am building a better solar system. It'll be 8-panel system this time around. So 800 watts total of power that can come in. And I'm running lithium iron batteries, which are now very affordable and perform better than AGMs of the past. Much lighter, smaller, they can do better. So I'm going to be running I forget how many amp hours that bank will be, but it'll be a few hundred amp hours. And I think I'm going to try to do a 24-volt wiring for my system.
And so, bigger charge controller. We are working
Yes.
towards having an off grid switch where we can transfer the power from on to off grid. Where Keegan's
Yeah,
still
that's still educating
researching
myself on
that.
that one. I need to educate how to do that properly, or if I have to hire someone to do that part.
And I believe you mentioned we need a bigger inverter still before completely doing the system.
We did get a bigger inverter. We're going with a 40 amp inverter this time around. That
Oh,
can also be chained to another 40 amp. So in the future, if we had to have 80 amps total, we could.
and so the reason upgrading the system, number one, is we are in a full size home now and no longer a yurt. Technically, our house square footage wise is still considered a tiny home by most people. However, it is to us a full size home. So we are running more lights than we ever did in the yurt. Still LED lights and fairly low energy use lights.
Our biggest energy consumers now, I would say, are the chest freezer. We have a chest freezer running at all times. We have to service a water pump for our pickup for our well. That's a pretty large pump system to be running throughout the day.
We do have a water heater that uses some electricity, but it is propane based.
On-demand propane, yep.
We do have a crock pot. We don't use it all the time, but that is an energy consumption. We do have a toaster that we use on a fairly regular basis.
And I like to run for the shop at times, air compressor, heat gun. These things are large consumers of electricity.
So we do have higher electrical needs. And in the summertime, we do run one fan pretty much regularly.
The larger box fan.
And then the children each have individual fans that are rechargeable. So we are charging things for a lot of battery operated items. So it's a very small energy consumption that our family has compared to the average American. However, compared to how we used to live, it is at least doubled in size. Hence, the doubling of our solar system is in the progress, or more than double.
More than double. I'd say triple to quadruple at this point.
I say double because I see double panels, and that to me doubles the system. But again,
We're
I'm not the
starting.
brains behind this. Keegan is the one who is completely in control and figuring out, and he has the brain that works. If it were me, I would be saving up money and hiring somebody to do it because I don't have the mental bandwidth to research and figure out and DIY all of it. Thankfully, my husband saves us the money and does it himself.
For those wondering, I'm going with 8 panels to start. We may need more panels depending on how much energy we need. But you want to start with an even number, whether you do 2 or 4 or 8, because it's much easier to bring in the positive and negative ends to your charge controller when you have a balanced number or an even number, especially if you're using what I'm going to be using, like splitters, where it can take 4 inputs and make it into 1 output. Go to the charge controller. That really helps with your wiring. So anyway, long story short, if you're thinking about panels, always assume you're going to do it in even sets.
So, with our revamped solar setup, we are definitely taking it little by little as we have the time and the extra finances to put into it. Because again, we do have on grid capacity at this moment. We do have a generator backup, but we'd also like to have the solar capacity, and that's a very important thing for us. So, I believe we still need the inverter, transfer switch, wiring, fuses.
Yes, the inverter, I need to figure out an inverter that'll work for us. I need to figure out the safety and how to of wiring it to the house box so that we could seamlessly switch between our solar battery bank to feed the house or the line power to feed the house. So a large safety factor that we have not mentioned thus far is fuses. I'm a firm believer in using fuses in all of your positive lines. That means making sure you're fusing or circuit breaking, which is an easier and function now. Circuit breaking, the positive line going from the main feed line going from your charge controller to your panels. Also, again, the line going from your charge controller to your battery bank, and the line going from your battery bank to your inverter. All of these need to have safety built in place. It does matter. Fire hazards can happen, and it's always good to build these in place. You don't have to get something so specialized, though. What I found is just stores that carry equipment for sound systems, like car sound systems or even just vehicle systems. Vehicles are still built with direct or DC current systems, 12-volt systems in place. So a lot of these things, you might need a specialized piece, but you might find what you're looking for at one of these dealers for vehicle systems. And it might fix what you need in a pinch. That's what I used to use when I first started using fuses. I did card little mini bladed fuses and little fuse holders, and that worked okay. This next time around, I'm going to use actual circuit breaker protection that's used for larger amps in like sound systems or stereo systems because it can handle the amount of amperage and feed. And if they pop, I can just reset them. I don't have to replace any fuse. But this is a very important piece. Do not skip that piece. Yes, the system can work without it, but if you ever have an overcharging condition, it'll melt the wire and cause a possible fire
Which
hazard.
we actually had in the yurt one time. And I'm so thankful
Yes, we
Keegan
did.
had fuses in place. He was gone, and all of a sudden the system wasn't working, and I couldn't figure out why. And when he got home and he showed me the fuse had blown, there were also melted wires.
Yep.
And so one of the parts had overheated in the system and came very close to causing a fire, but the fuse thankfully shut it all down and stopped that from happening.
So it does happen, especially when you least expect it.
And
So
while you're
always build
learning,
fuses.
especially.
Yep. And there's plenty of information out there if you need to know what type of fuse or how big or all that. There's a lot of information out there. There's rules of thumbs to go by. Definitely follow those to the T. Know the thickness, the gauge of your wire that you're using, and how much amperage is coming across
Now,
the
with
wire.
thickness of wire, this is something Keegan taught me. The smaller the number, the thicker the wire. The larger the number, the thinner the wire. And I still
Right.
forget sometimes, but it's backwards land when it comes to
It's
wiring
like
with
golf.
numbers in your head. The smaller the wire, or the smaller the number, the thicker the wire.
Correct.
And so, definitely something I have had to learn with our solar journey.
Yep. So if you're going to be wiring this yourself, you need to understand gauges or AWG of the wiring and what that means and how to measure that. And also the type of wire, whether it is copper, like solid copper braided, or whether it's only copper clad. I will say be very careful if you're buying parts from Amazon or other sellers like that. There's a plethora of very cheap copper clad, but it's aluminum wiring. While aluminum will work, it cannot handle the same amperage load at the same thickness that a copper wire can. So a copper wire at the same thickness can handle more amperage than an aluminum wiring at the same thickness. And
So don't cheap
unfortunately,
out your
don't
wiring.
cheap out. Again, like I said, the most of the money is going to go into your charge controller and into your wiring, assuming you're using high quality wiring. Again, you can find high quality wiring from suppliers of high amp systems for subwoofers or for audio systems because they understand this issue and this principle. And so I found a lot of the good, aside from a specialized solar power provider, you might also find really good stock of wiring from audio system stores.
So when it comes to solar, don't be afraid. You can do it, but you do need to invest the time and research before you do jump into solar. Research only costs your time. And if you don't have the time to invest into the research, then definitely ask for help. If you don't have the skills or know the legalities, or some places legally require you to hire a professional. So know where you're at and what your skill and your comfort level is. Maybe you've done all the research and you're just not comfortable. Then be honest, and that's okay. Not everybody has the skill set or the ability to do it. I've done a lot of research. It just is above me. And that is not an area that I feel comfortable working in. And that's okay. And we embrace that. And so Keegan, thankfully, can take that on. But if you're in the place where you're not comfortable, seek out a professional. And there's no shame in doing that. We just wanted to share our solar journey, where we're at, and some of the tips and tricks that we've learned along the way.
Yeah, my biggest word of wisdom would be research before you do something. Don't just try to slap something together. Don't just try to. This is a case where you probably shouldn't just use whatever's lying around unless you know it meets the safety and requirements of what you need. This would be where new is best, especially with your batteries. If there's been any damage to old batteries, all of that factors in. So really starting with new the best you can, and knowing what you're doing before you ever put it together.
Know that it might take time to save towards these things, and that's okay.
Yep, that's part of your research, learning what you actually need so that you know what the number is you need to save towards.
Well, it's about time to wrap this one up.
So please like, share, subscribe, and join our email list.
And don't forget, go out
Dream big
and discover your own Yurtiful life.